On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler took his life as the Soviets encircled Berlin. Over the last 12 years, through conquest and brutality, he had built an empire spanning from the coasts of France to the scorching deserts of the Sahara. The Third Reich was an empire spanning over 15 countries and 2 continents at its height in 1942. But what if I told you there was another part of the world the Nazis conquered to add to their vastly expanding empire? A part of the world so remote and desolate that it remains the source of conspiracy theories to this day. Today, we will discuss the Nazi invasion of Antarctica. Aeronaut. Shortly before the start of the Second World War, the Nazi regime had a problem. While they were making preparations for what would be one of Europe's biggest tragedies, they made the realization that war didn't just require a stable economy and a viable fighting force, but also the resources to nourish their armies. So, after becoming aware of the issue, they set out to develop a plan that aimed to find a sustainable source of oils in case one was cut off during the war effort. The main fat source at the time were products created using whale oil, but that wasn't its only use. Everything in the country, from lighting fuel to cosmetics, was reliant on the resource, and most importantly for the war effort, nitroglycerin, also known as dynamite, required the substance. Without whale oil, there'd be no war, and Germany's main whale oil supply was Norway. And as they were striving for total independence for the upcoming military plans, this didn't fit in their vision of an autonomous Germany. So, it quickly became apparent that they had to find another way to supply the fat source. Helmut Wohltat, a German councillor of state, decided that they had to take a risk. Recognizing an opportunity, he proposed a bold expedition to Hermann Göring, aimed at undermining Norway's territorial claim over the part of the Arctic they had used to obtain the Waltran, an area known as Queen Maudland. By doing so, they would secure access to abundant resources in the surrounding waters, crucial for the production of margarine. And that wasn't the only thing the Reich was interested in. Many world powers were looking towards laying claim on Antarctica, as it was the last continent on the world that wasn't controlled by any faction. And as they were closely approaching the halfway point of the 4-year program, they decided to task a group of men with the mission to lay claim on Antarctica and establish a source of the resource they so desperately needed. Consequently, in May 1938, preparations commenced for the secret German Antarctic expedition. However, as the Third Reich was preparing for the war, the Arctic mission would be heavily neglected, and only the most essential tools were brought along to the journey, as the clock was ticking. Equipped with what the government would be able to provide them with in the short term, the crew of 82 set sail straight towards the Arctic on the MS Neuschwabenland, a freight vessel that had been converted into an icebreaker over the past few months. But complications would quickly arise before the expedition could even really start. The Norwegian government quickly got wind of their doings and instated a land claim over the area they were trying to capture, making the potential ownership of one of the world's last unclaimed continents very difficult to obtain. The issues only started there. The ship would arrive roughly a month later and would immediately start using the planes they had brought with them in an attempt to map the area they were trying to conquer. But during one flight, one of the planes was running low on fuel and decided to drop the box of landmarkers they had brought along to fortify their claim in order to lighten the load, making one of the main objectives of the mission impossible to complete. And it wouldn't end there. The harsh conditions made most of the goals incredibly difficult to accomplish, and the explorers were lacking tools, as the preparation of the mission had been rushed and widely underfunded. And with none of their objectives completed, the explorers had to return home with empty hands, and as the country was rapidly approaching the start of the war, no further expeditions were started, as the Reich had found different sources for the fluid. But maybe the attempt at conquering the Arctic wasn't such a bad idea. With rising sea levels and temperatures, a war started. An almost silent war between the biggest militaries in the world, the NATO and Russia. Not too long ago, Russia started their expansion into the Arctic, and NATO would soon follow. The central position of the continent makes the area an incredibly valuable resource in modern warfare, and it is also speculated that it may be one of the last places in the world with almost untapped natural resources such as oil and precious metals. And according to NATO, Russia has already developed several submarines equipped with nuclear warheads into the Arctic waters in an attempt to gain control of the sea routes that will be created by climate change, making it one of the most contested places of our future world. So, who knows? Maybe the place that used to be untouchable will soon turn into a battlefield for global powers to fight their battles.